So welcome back to ROV Chats, and today Stephen and I will be talking about the effect of environment on your state of consciousness, especially in relation to your meditation practice. So Stephen's going to begin with a story about a friend of his and how engagement with a certain game system affected his state of consciousness. So Stephen?
Thank you, Kevin, and love and blessings to everybody. Yeah, I wanted to start off by sharing about how environment and particularly devices and technology can actually affect our meditation practice. So I have a good friend who is quite an avid PlayStation fan and player. And if you've played like I have in the past, I'm sure you know that there is a tremendously addictive quality to PlayStation and you can play a game. So in my case, I was playing with a good friend and you can spend hours. Hours can go past, you're immersed in a virtual world, and there is often not much else that's coming into your consciousness. And in fact, you may also find, like me, if you had gone through that process, that at night you might have all sorts of images that come up of what you've been playing, because it tends to be kind of indelibly printed on your brain, and that and it creates patterns and imagery that repeat themselves because you're playing out a scenario over and over again. So anyway, one of the things that I was curious about was how this would actually affect my friend's brain. And fortunately, he had a Muse. So he had a Muse S, and he was able to do some readings over a period of time and record some graphs. Now, the curious thing is that prior to doing this intensive PlayStation game scenario in which he basically played a game through from beginning to end, well, I'd say a number of hours a day, perhaps 3-4 hours or so each day. The prior to that, his brain showed fairly relaxed alpha. He had some nice gamma swells in all over his brain, and it was a pretty balanced state, and he knew it, and he said he could feel that. He could feel it was pretty relaxed. And then he just decided to go on a PlayStation binge, and he had done this for several weeks. So particularly we looked at a 3-day section in which he decided to do it intensely just as a test. And what happened was his brainwave, the typical brainwave signature or the pattern or the way the orchestra and those brainwave instruments were playing rearranged itself. Beta shot up. So even when he was meditating, there was this really strong beta signal, almost as if the imagery and focus that he had so strongly brought into his PlayStation practice was totally present in his meditative states. He was quite shocked. I was quite curious that this would be such a pronounced effect. So then we did the opposite. So we really significantly changed the overall pattern and then brain signature. So then we did the reverse. We did, the 3 days of when you don't play at all, even though you might be thinking about it. And at the end of that, we then did a separate recording, and sure enough, it had turned itself around, not completely. So, for example, the gamma swells that he traditionally had shown in all 4 quadrants weren't there. But they did arise in the rear section, so in the temporal areas, and potentially that means in the parietal and occipital areas were likely to be activated. So he was curious. And the interesting thing it also showed was in his frontal sections, there was still, even though gamma rose in the temporal areas, so it shifted to and alpha was much more predominant, there was still this incredible focus, like a flat focus, a knitting of the beta, delta, and theta in the frontal senses of the Muses. So this was, Kevin, this was a real insight to see how dramatically just 3 to 4 days of doing an activity that perhaps the brain is not so accustomed to, you suddenly dive into it, do it, or still meditating, but it actually shifted the meditative patterns. So I thought, just as a beginning example of how environment can really influence not just our states, he said he felt it. He could feel there was some difference, but he didn't know exactly what. He was aware that he was focused, so he could still focus really well in the meditation, but something was different. There was a felt sense of not the same relaxation. He also reported that at night, during dreams, or it was difficult to get to sleep. The dreams were flooded with imagery of what was happening during the gameplay, and he awoke not feeling so rested. So it was, I'm very grateful to him, of course, for doing this experiment. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do this unless under the guidance of a good friend, but it was a really telling experiment and a great insight into the way environment can act so strongly on our, what we could say is our natural effortless brain signature.
Right. And I mean, how many people and how many of us are sitting at computers, not necessarily playing games, but really focusing on content on our screens and for significant periods of time during the day, and how that affects our state of consciousness and our bodies.
Right, right.
One thing that I've noticed, and it prompted me to go out and get a frequency reading device, was that at the end of my meditation sessions in the morning, I feel so vibrant and relaxed, but vibrant, alert, and just ready for the day. And I go downstairs, make breakfast, still feeling all that, and then sit down at the computer to start doing, interacting online and doing emails and everything. And if I sit there and do that for a couple hours, my energy level just starts to drop. And so we've all heard about the effects of electromagnetic fields and electric fields and radio frequencies. And so anyway, one of the things that I decided I wanted to do was to really try to get a picture of the electromagnetic radio frequency field in my environment and how it was affecting my body and my state of consciousness. So I got this this reader, and you see it's going off now because, let's see, it's in the electric field sensing mode, and I'm pointing it at the computer, and it's showing in a high range. Interestingly, so I have it now, so that's maybe about 15 inches from the computer. And if I pull it back, so this is a reading of 94 volts per meter. Then I go back 66, 60, 58, 52, 30, 16, and 3. Really, now I'm probably about 3 feet from the screen. So it's dramatic, the difference, and you heard the alarm went off. It's dramatic, the difference. Now, if I go back from 3 here, just pull it forward 6 inches, 51. So I went from 55 volts per meter, pull it back 6 inches, 2 volts per meter in a 6-inch distance. So what that has inspired me to do is to, whenever I can, like when we're doing Zooms like this, now I position my chair back far enough from the computer so that I'm out of that range. I'm back at this 2 level. I also have my phone far away, because I've discovered that when there's any activity on my phone, when it's receiving a text, sending a text, receiving a call, sending a call, the radio frequencies go crazy. They go up to say 700-800 milliwatts per meter squared. So, and the recommended range is to be under 100. So just the distance from our devices, that's a big thing that I took away from this. Same thing with the router in our home. I found that was one of the most powerful emitters of these radio frequencies. But I found if we stay, keep our desks and chairs and tables and everything at least 6 to 8 feet away from the router, huge difference, just like you saw the difference here. Every foot made a difference. So that's something to consider, in our work environment, but also in our meditation practice, how that's affecting our state of consciousness and our mind and our brain waves and the health of our bodies. So then another thing that really applies to this group who's really interested in measuring brain waves is I took out the Muse devices. So I have a Muse 1, Muse 2, and I put them on, turned them on, hooked them up to the phone, put the phone far enough away from me so it wasn't affecting my field, and then started it and I measured all around the Muse device, and it was completely quiet. Nothing registered there. I also have a new device called Flow Time, another headband sensing device that also has heart rate variability on it, and measured that, and that was fine too for all the different EMF, the electric fields, and the radio frequencies. So those seem to be really quiet, and fortunately for all of us here who like to experiment with measuring our brain waves, those seem to be completely safe and not causing any disturbance in the force. But I have, learned now to put my cell phone that is connected to the device at least 3 feet away from me now, so that I'm out of the range of those signals. So anyway, that's something that was, when I got this meter, I've been learning so much about how these fields affect our bodies, like in terms of feeling fatigue, but also, like you said, affecting our brainwaves and states of consciousness.
That's, Kevin, you reminded me of a beautiful time with Muse when I was very busy experimenting in different environments. So I took the Muse and went and measured it in parks, at temples, at the beach, and so on and so forth. And I did realize, because especially my brain, like yours, shows this natural flow of gamma and theta, and in the energy raising section it's more gamma, and in the stillness section it's theta, or predominantly theta and alpha. And the interesting thing I noticed was that it was very effortless when I was at a temple or out in the mountains, or somewhere at the beach, to get this very easeful flow of. I remember you and I often used to call it dolphin flow. It was just, we would arc up and over, and so I wanted to really draw everybody's attention to the importance of our environments. That truly, a bit like the Buddhist mandala, our environment, whether it's our meditation room or our home or our neighborhood or the areas we frequent, like our shopping center, that there are ways that we can make those our mandala, our living sacred environment. And I think, when we meditate, we tend to compartmentalize a bit and say, okay, well, here's my meditation room with my altar and shrine, or whatever you happen to have. Sometimes not aware that we can make our whole family house there, not necessarily by external means, but certainly one by our own awareness of being aware that this really, we are in sacred relationship with all things and all people and all creatures. And the other thing is that, as you're well aware, essential oils, smells, sounds. So you put on specific sounds, like the sound of the ocean, and there is a kind of trigger in the body that kind of feels, oh, that beautiful wash of the ocean, or the beautiful wash and feeling of forest sounds and birds. So I'm fortunate that I've got a forest and a Zen temple right next to me, so I can go and put my Muse headset on it, go and be in those kind of places. But the importance of creating sacred spaces for ourselves, not just in our meditation room, but in our family home and in our environment. And like when when you go shopping to the supermarket, I often used to imagine that I was walking inside a mandala. And so I'd see all the people as Buddhas and see everything that was on the stores as, nectar, and the ground was filled with lotus blossoms. And it was really amazing what a huge difference that made to my experience of the supermarket. And I'd go in with a smile and go out with a smile. It was just a very simple and practical way of making everything that we experience a sacred relationship.
Mm. And that point is just as important as arranging our physical environment, how we relate to our environment. So how we relate to everything makes a huge difference in how we feel, and how we feel creates our internal environment. And that is essential in our practice and in our life, is creating an internal environment of awareness and compassion and connection with all of life. So I think the main thing we want to leave people with today is just this importance of environment, importance of the external environment, of how we relate to the external environment, how we arrange it, and also the importance of the internal environment, that is how we are feeling about everything around us. So
Beautifully said, Kevin. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We really appreciate your support.